Labdien! Šis ir raidījums Nākotnes kapitāls. Raidījums, kurā mēs ne tikai runājam par to, kā investēt, bet arī paši investējam. Mani sauc Raivis Vilons, un šodien mums ir mazliet citādāks raidījums. Mēs esam studijā uzaicinājuši vienu finanšu ekspertu, un vēl mums Zoomā pieslēdzās no Lietuvas un Igaunijas divi finanšu eksperti, lai runātu par Baltijas kapitāla tirgiem, par to, kas ir mūsu stiprās puses, kas ir mūsu vājās puses. Saruna notiks angļu valodā, bet apakšā raidījuma skatītāji varēs izlasīt subtitrus, protams. Un tagad es pārslēgšos uz angļu valodu un sarunāšos ar mūsu viesiem. Okay, so now I'm ready to talk with you all. So I will introduce you. First, here in the studio with me is Robert Idelson, who is the Chief Executive Officer at Signet Bank.
Hello.
Yes. And in the Zoom, we have Mikael Torim, who is the Head of Investment Banking at LHV Group.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. And Irmantas Norkus, who is the Managing Partner of Cobalt Lithuania.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. And I am very happy to have you all here because I think it is very important even for amateur investors, even for retail investors to actually understand something about the market. These are not the years when you can invest in anything and you will probably get away with it. Like in 2021, you could just pick up randomly a tech stock, and probably by the end of 2021, you had a pretty good look at the portfolio. So I'm super happy that we can talk about Baltic markets. And yes, so the first question for Robert is we need to establish what is the situation, what has been the situation this year in Baltic markets, and will we see any changes in the remaining 3 months, or is the, well, basically nothing much happening is going to be the motto of this year?
Yes, hello, pleasure to be here. Yes, this year was a bit slower in terms of capital markets transactions in the Baltic countries compared to the previous years, but I really feel that the last quarter will be much more active because here in Latvia we have one upcoming IPO of the egg producer APF Holding, which is going to start in the middle of October. And maybe there's going to be another one later in the year, or maybe the first quarter of next year, a larger one, which we don't know about the company yet, but still there is one more transaction potential upcoming. I know in Estonia, probably colleagues in Lithuania will comment more, but I know that in Estonia there is a certain plan to have an IPO also later this year. But also in Latvia, if we talk not only about equities, but also about bonds, there is this public offering of bonds of Eleving Group, which I think is also a relatively interesting investment because the coupon rate is more than 10% per annum. So it's also, okay, it's not equity type of return, but still it's quite close to the equity type of return. So for investors who are looking for opportunities in the Baltic countries, I think the last quarter of the year will be fairly interesting.
Okay, that's good to hear. And Irmantas, how is the view from Lithuania?
I would say the view is very optimistic, and I would call this year as a slow year or somewhat different from the year that we have had in 2021 or 2022. And so stocks in the Baltic market performed quite well. And if you compare with similar indexes in overseas, say US or UK, we may see that performance of stocks is somewhat comparable. Just I'll put on the screen showing S&P 500. That's the index from the US stock market, and you see that stocks performed or increased in value by 12.4% this year. And if we look at Baltic index of 10 largest listed companies in our stock exchange, they performed similarly, 11% plus, right? So I would say that, our markets, they are following kind of patterns or trends in overall global capital markets, and there is nothing unusual. we perhaps know that our economies or global economies are under macroeconomic pressures, and we have high inflation, which is kind of fought by central banks with high interest rates, and that of course have effect on lower amounts of trades or activity in capital markets as well. So I would say that nothing kind of dramatic or controversial is happening in our regions. And similarly to Latvia and Estonia, we have Lithuanian companies considering public listing, an IPO. And there were kind of public announcements already. We have tech companies like Nord Security or Tesonet VPN service provider, which has recently raised a big amount of money and is considering a larger IPO. Clearly not this year, but in coming years, definitely. So we see higher activity in issuing bonds or debt securities. And this is again a natural kind of effect of increased interest rates and difficulties in refinancing the current borrowings. So the stock market and debt market and capital markets in general in Baltics, I would say they live a healthy life, and there is no big difference from what we used to see like 2 years ago. Activity is slower or lower, but due to natural reasons.
Thank you. And how is the view from Estonia, Mikhail?
Yes, no, I pretty much agree with what was said before. Yeah, overall, I think the situation is good, and it's on sort of solid ground. And if you know, for context, if you look at the neighboring regions, if you look at Nordics, Europe, and even US, I mean, the IPO market overall has significantly dropped. So this is not a sort of some sort of a phenomenon of Baltics. And what we see is that there is, from Estonia, there's a lot of interest, and it's very sort of various interest. It's smaller companies that want to get listed due to growth reasons. It's larger companies that simply see that being public, being listed is a good solution in the long run. So there is, I would say, you know, very high level of interest. But you know, given the sort of slow markets we've had, it's just a matter of you know, what's the right moment, what's the right sort of combination when to come public, and also fully agree when it comes to the bonds. The market situation is changing, so there's a lot of work going on with companies' balance sheets, sort of reviewing how the future should look like. As you might know, I mean, LHV had a very overwhelmingly successful subordinated bond placement just recently, which sort of showed that the retail investors, at least in Estonia, they are you know, very keen to look at various instruments as has been in the past. So I also would say that the health and the interest is there. There's nothing. It's been just a slow market due to the geopolitical tensions and sort of overall economic situation. But it will definitely change, and hopefully quite soon.
Yeah, and I want to stay with you, Mikhail, for a bit and ask you the next question is, yeah, like you already, you all three basically mentioned that it has been slower, but there is nothing unhealthy. It's a normal situation. But when we look at, for example, Western markets like USA, large indexes, there have been way more ups and downs, like this year, for example. And a lot of it has been due to the technology sector. I recently had an interview with Nasdaq Tallinn head Karel Ots, who said to me, like I asked a similar question, I asked him, so why are there those ups and downs? Why here in Baltics we are going steady basically this year. We are not falling, we are not climbing. And he said, well, look at the 6-7 top companies in S&P 500, in Nasdaq 100, and all other large indexes, basically tech sector. So My question for you, Mikhail, is do we lack the tech sector? I would not say that it is bad that our stock market has not fluctuated so much, but would we need more tech companies, more innovative companies to get our market to move more energetically? Because sometimes it feels sleepy, let's say it. And again, I'm not saying that it is bad. Investors love stability. It's nothing bad, but maybe we are lacking this sector here.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. It's different ways to answer this and analyze this. I think my sort of first emotion is that I think Baltic needs all kinds of companies listed just to get the sort of a critical mass of the exchange higher, because the local capitalization of the Baltic market, to the GDP, it's still extremely low. So I would say that all sectors are welcome. There's still a lot to do in terms of representation. When it comes to tech, it's a lot of these companies, when they grow to a certain stage, they're simply, they've had very lucrative offers in terms of acquisition. So I cannot really blame a company when they do a decision. Sort of whether it's taken private or they will completely sort of outgrow this market here. But nevertheless, there's always opportunity for smaller growth companies in the tech sector as well, and mid-sized also, potentially also thinking about dual listing, because any company that has sort of grown out of Baltics and looking at the sort of retail activity here, which compared to any European country, again, especially in Estonia, I think it's incredible. So I would say that, finding solutions in order to get more tech companies on board, we're definitely working on that as well, and seeing what can be done. But it's, ultimately what we want to see is, high quality companies, growth companies, dividend payers. So it's not really a definition of, what they're doing, but it's really about the sort of profile and quality that we always want to see on the exchange.
Irmantas, do you have maybe something?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. It's not about the sector, tech, or say old economy energy companies. It's about quality of the company that is being listed, and trust that it is producing and enhancing development of capital markets, right? So imagine a young tech company with brilliant idea in the field of AI and having this really good growth and development prospects, and offering its shares to public, and after 1 or 2 years it collapses, right? So what's the value of this company in our kind of list or public exchange? So it's better to have good and established, I would say, and innovative growing companies offering their kind of stocks to public. And I'm looking at our Lithuanian issuers, and see that those the companies that are really doing well, they are mostly kind of national champions or leaders in their markets. And let me just again briefly share the screen of the performance of Lithuanian companies this year. For example, Apranga, hopefully you know this company from kind of where you buy your clothes. That's a retailer of garments, and its shares increased by 46% this year, right? We have Grigea, producer of packaging material, and really expanding a lot in just recently acquired factory in Poland. So both companies, and Ignit is our national energy company, Novaturas, probably know, Šiaulių Bankas. So both companies are quality companies in my view. They are established, reliable, with clear business ideas, strategies, with good governance. So this is where I would invest, and I invest my money. So they are not technology companies, but they are producing results, and this is what I like. And again, back to my opening statement, that it's not the sector, but more quality in what we do and how we manage this.
Mm-hmm. Robert, do you have any additional remarks?
No, I think that it's important to get the critical mass on the Latvian part of the Nasdaq Baltics stock market and also overall Baltic stock markets. And I don't really think that technological sector should be necessarily the one which drives the show. But of course, not everybody, but there are many investors who would be excited to have like fast-growing companies with great perspective, export-oriented, so that you would make not like 10, 15, 20% return per annum, but where you can double your money in 2 years. But actually, I really doubt we're gonna see this type of companies on the stock exchange very soon. So I would advise to calm down a little bit. So if there is a desire amongst local investors, your viewers, to invest in these companies, I think there are plenty of them across the globe. But if we're talking about the local businesses, I actually would like to see more of the stable companies, solid with solid performance, solid profit growth, good perspectives to develop, but not necessarily with very high volatility. Because I think that for many investors, if they have a first experience with investing in the stock market, which ends up with losses, that's not a very good experience for the going forward for the long-term development. So that's why I would advise maybe as first couple of years for people who are just starting to invest in the stock markets, just to get the experience with more stable and less volatile stocks.
Yeah, and it seems that the Baltic market is pretty good for it. And yeah, the Irmantas showed the graph, and you, Robert, also mentioned that our IPO this year, the egg producer. So a lot of experts are saying, not only about the Baltic market, but general global markets, that we right now are in the era where companies that have a solid business case, that have a solid numbers behind their back, are way more attractive to investors than, like you said, rapid growing companies who sell dreams, basically. Because there have been like some of the tech companies, and we see that some of them have struggled globally, especially this year and last year. Companies that sell dreams, that sell this doubling your investment, are really, really struggling, while the companies that provide fundamentals, like Irmantas showed, clothing, energy, food, we don't know how AFP Holding will do, but experts say that it might be good. So I will turn this time first to Irmantas. So are we seeing some sort of a shift in the markets, that now investors are more looking for these companies with good fundamentals, with practical products that everyone can see in the shop, touch, eat, buy, wear?
Well, again, it's kind of a complicated question, right? Investors, what investors do we have in our Baltic markets? Predominantly, both are retail investors, right? Mm-hmm. So it's people, and it's like you and me and our friends. So typically we have a choice to look for innovative, fast-growing companies in other markets. But what we invest in local markets, in the companies that we understand, that we know, right, that we trust, that's so it's basically my answer would be that our investors, retail investors, Baltic investors, they still are eager or inclined to choose the companies that we know. And the companies that we know is all that you mentioned: energy, retail, financial services, maybe health sector, and yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's that's a natural kind of investment targets for Baltic companies, I would say. And new companies that are offering their shares to public, they have to create the story and to sell this. So it's perhaps it's not that easy to sell this to conservative buyer, conservative investor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mikhail, partly while I was asking this question, I remembered about IPO from Estonia, Grab2Go, that didn't achieve their IPO goals. Right after the IPO, I talked with the Grab2Go guys, and they admitted that maybe they have not sold their story well enough, but also we talked about the general sentiment in the market. So how do you see? Are investors looking for those fundamentals, and maybe that the tech story didn't grab them, or maybe it's just the inflation, just like Irmantas already said, we have predominantly retail investors who are very connected with their wallet. Like I have to eat, I have to pay the bills, my mortgage rate is rising rapidly, so I will probably abstain from investing. Or is there something else more?
Yeah, look, I think it's pretty much everything you said. So the overall conditions, in the whole, let's say, monetary system have changed drastically over the course of past 2 years. And what it basically means is that the cost of capital is much more expensive. So ultimately, the money companies are making now is worth much more. The money you have in your pocket, which you can sort of freely put into deposits and sort of a low risk instruments, it's very different. So it all really boils down to, whether you trust the story, what do you see, and it's basically it's just so much easier now to invest into safer plays, and the risk when it comes to the sort of early stage tech companies is that if they're not really able to achieve what they promised, the next round of capital raise, it can be even more difficult. So basically, you're going into cases where you might run out of cash at any point in time, and the conditions are harsh. So if you look at the tech sector across the world, if you look at it now in Baltics, I think it's just a sort of a shift of sentiment. But ultimately, it's about quality, it's about story. Sometimes things come together, sometimes they don't. So but it's not, like you said, it's not so straightforward anymore that you just go to the market and the money is always there. So people are really thinking hard. And I think the retail investor in Baltics, they're a smart crowd. They know what works, what doesn't. They know how to analyze stocks. There's a lot of people who are doing that work with them and for them. So it's just more difficult market.
Robert, how smart are we?
No, I think actually, it's not about the smartness, it's about the experience and knowledge. And I guess, it's not a surprise that to anybody that in Estonia investors are much more savvy in investing in capital markets. They have much more experience, a positive experience. And that's why, obviously, for any IPO which is happening in the Baltic countries, we see a lot of Estonian investors participating in these IPOs. And talking about Latvia, I really hope that this situation will continue to improve. I think that the last 2 years, we've seen a lot of new accounts being opened in local banks, and much more money, retail money, going into the stock market. And I think actually that we lack some issuers and companies, but at least with these two offerings we're going to have this quarter, these bonds of Elevink and egg producers equity IPO, I think these are pretty solid companies, which maybe it's not very hypey companies, like where you would not expect to double your money in 1 or 2 years, but these are solid businesses which will definitely continue to grow and bring positive experience to any investor who gonna invest in these stocks. So and I think in Latvia we need to do more in terms of facilitating retail investors' knowledge and interest. So that's why I'm very happy with what you are doing, and I really believe that if we are able to achieve what Estonia has achieved in terms of number of people investing in the stock market, then the country itself going to be much more wealthy, and then specific people also get much more wealthy. But don't be. I mean, my advice to a retail investor once again is not to be so excited about the stock market. It's not a casino. You're not for a short run to make quick profits. It's about long-term investments always.
Yeah, Irmantas, I feel you have something to add.
Yes, if I may just continue about profile of Baltic capital markets investor, right? Just let me share with you this survey conducted by Bank of Lithuania, and hopefully you see the figures here. So the Bank of Lithuania 2 years ago asked respondents what are the most attractive investment of your spare capital. So both the younger kind of potential investors, we said 45% that real estate is the place to invest money, right? 21, it's crypto and virtual currencies. And only 9% of respondents, they said that securities is a good place to put your money. With the second age group, 30 to 50, right, we still see this dominant real estate investment class. And then the securities or stocks or bonds, it makes over the age groups 10% only. So this is the kind of profile of our potential investor or participant in the Baltic markets. So I think this literacy of investing into public markets is still very low, and we are in the process of growing a new generation of investors. I think people that are 50 plus, they tend to become more conservative, right? And they perhaps not go into virtual currencies or a tech company stock. So my point is here that we still have small interest or knowledge, knowing and trust in investing into stock market. And but again, this is not unusual. You know, our stock markets, capital markets, they operate for what, 30 years only, right? So it's a way to go, I think, but we're getting there. Mm-hmm. And you know, from what I see in Lithuania, that number of trades or transactions in public stocks is increasing. The value may fluctuate from year to year. In 21, we had kind of peak when the values dropped, but number of trades or transactions is steadily increasing, which is a really good sign.
Yeah.
And I think more people getting into the stocks and they are trading with kind of more trust and they are braver.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and Irmantas, I will continue with you because Robert already mentioned. So we know that from our 3 Baltic states, Latvia is the worst investor. Latvians are the worst. We are varying degrees, but we are basically 5 or 6 times behind our Lithuanian and Estonian neighbors in market capitalization. And that is not good. Hopefully that will change. But Irmantas, what drives Lithuanian investors? Why Lithuania has seen this growth in the capital market? What makes the retail investor to be interested? Because that also is connected, of course, with the companies. When companies see that there are investors, they are probably more willing to consider listing. So what is the secret here that we can copy?
I don't think there is any secret, right? So it's not that Lithuanians or Estonians very much different from Latvians. So it cannot simply be so. We share the same history, and our beginnings or start was at the same time. So we followed the same path, and we are members of the same kind of community. So there is no secret. I mean, size of economies and structure of economies, both perhaps are the reasons, right? Lithuania is more diverse in terms of we have more sectors producing more kind of value, and so it's let's take our retail Maxim, and they are really good in what we do. Our energy companies, our kind of shipping and transportation companies. We also we have kind of furniture producers or manufacturers. We have financial services. So it's maybe because of structure of our economy, we have more companies on the list, right? So there is more kind of offer. And when you look at the Nasdaq's list, we have Lithuanian and Estonian companies having kind of the largest position and Latvians. So there is an offer, supply of Lithuanian stocks, and we have perhaps more folks investing into stocks. So I cannot identify anything in particular that Lithuania is doing right and Latvia is not doing. So it's perhaps those are structural reasons.
And Michael. Okay, yeah,
yes.
Irmantas, continue, please. Sorry.
No, I was just, no.
Yeah.
So that was my point. There is no magic here in Lithuania, and you know, perhaps it's like a snowball effect, and then one Lithuanian company goes public, you know, its competitor start thinking hardly how to get public too, and how to outsmart its competitors. So it's again could be a snowball.
Yeah, Michael, do you agree? No secrets there, just structure.
I absolutely agree. I think this is what we discussed before as well, that it's really about laying the foundation, adding more companies which have quality. Adding more good stories basically brings more good stories to the market. So it's just a matter of which companies to take their steps and when they do. And ultimately, the Baltic investor universe, I think it's still quite unified because it's a small region. So it's just a matter of when which company comes to the market, and as I said, it's just the order so far has been that Estonian and Lithuanian companies, there's more representation, they're bigger, but as we see in Latvia, also there are many things happening in terms of privatization, in terms of private IPOs, in terms of bond issuance. So we just have to make sure that this continues.
Robert, will this continue? Are we seeing the start of this snowball maybe? Because 2021, 2022 sure looked like that. We had multiple companies, good companies that are even now performing well. Practical companies, for example, Virši, Madara, we can go into their stores and see what they are offering. Is the snowball starting to roll?
No, I think there are, first of all, two things. If we talk about equities, I think it's crucial for the Latvian stock market that at least one of the local state or municipal owned companies comes out and does an IPO, lists on the stock exchange. Because basically that sets an example, because in any of the country, people are also looking not only about what their neighbors are doing, but also what about the government. And if government is not willing to show an example in, that this is a good thing to be on a stock exchange, then also for private sector, it's a certain, element that they are evaluating. And we hear a lot of rhetoric from the politicians that, maybe that's not the right thing to do, despite that our neighbors have done it in the past. So I think this has a certain element. But I really believe that next year we're going to see at least least one company doing listing on a stock exchange. And I think that's going to be the point when many of the local private companies will also, finally take these decisions and also follow the suit. And this will create this snowball effect of, more investors coming into these companies and, again, more issuers coming to the market and etc. So I think for the stock market, it's just, it needs to be a large IPO. Maybe it's going to be a private company. Maybe I really hope that maybe, for example, Air Baltic can do a successful IPO, and that could also get the ball rolling. But I really would expect that politicians finally make the decision to put at least one of the state-owned companies or municipally owned companies to the stock exchange. So that's about equities. And then we have the bond market, which is also, in my opinion, very attractive because now the interest rates are such that you can make, double-digit return, coupon return with bonds. Bonds are not so volatile, so it's not about speculation. It's just about earning, regular coupons. And there are bonds who are paying coupons on a monthly basis as well. So, and talking about the bond market, I think that this market has already reached a point when there are number of issues, so people can choose from many options, and this market has already had its big start, and I'm sure it's gonna continue. So I think for the capital market provides opportunities for all type of investors. For more conservatives, they can buy bonds, they can buy government bonds. There is Kraj obligations, which is, I think, is a beautiful instrument for anybody to start investing in the stock market, in capital markets in Latvia. Then we have bonds which are a bit more risky, which are not government issued, but private companies issued, which have a larger coupon. And then we have these stocks, which is maybe now it's not so many options, but it's going to continue, going to grow.
Yeah, and you already mentioned the Air Baltic. Another thing that I wanted to talk about, like Air Baltic, Bolt. There are some other large companies that, when considering IPO, they really are looking outside of the Baltic market because, the market is small and the company is very, very large. And in Lithuania as well, there are a bunch of really large companies. So my question would be is how large we can grow the Baltic market, and how do we attract these institutional investors that invest significant amounts of money? Because I have had interviews and conversations with institutional investors, even here in Latvia, that say that they can't really invest here in this market because they will create imbalance. The amount of money they will, even if they have the places where to store that amount of money, it will create artificial imbalance, and the stocks will be severely overvalued. It will be not a healthy market environment. So the question is, how large the market can we grow, and what should we do to try to attract these institutional investors? Because maybe relying on so much retail investors is not the correct way. Or maybe I'm totally wrong. Maybe it's completely normal. Roberts, we start with you.
Yeah, actually, I can tell my opinion, but then I would like to Michael to comment, because LHV just, I think this week you had this extremely positive experience with placing your subordinated bonds. So maybe you can talk about how you managed to achieve 400 million of demand for local placement, which is completely amazing. That shows basically the potential of the local capital market. And but I will leave it to Michael. But to answer your question, from my perspective, I think it's very important that if there is an IPO, for example, Air Baltic IPO, we realize that most likely a largest amount of money will come from abroad. But it should definitely be a lot of attention paid also to local investors, even if there's going to be a small demand. But because if Air Baltic hires an international investment bank who does an IPO on the I don't know whatever international capital markets, and they don't really cover local markets because they don't see a potential, that would lead also to a bad result. So I think in a Baltic IPO case, or in any other government company's IPO case, there has to be attention paid to the local investors. They had to make sure that they can invest in these companies, and they have enough information and coverage to be encouraged to do so. Coming back to your question about the institutional demand, I think it's a question of rather wanting to do something because obviously local pension funds, they're big and obviously for them it's not really interesting to consider relatively small investments into relatively small issues. But again, I think we can also create here some ways, like for example, local funds, maybe government autumn supported funds, which would be also helping these local companies to get these pooled resources from the local investors, from institutional and from retail investors into the local market. Because unfortunately, we don't have any dedicated funds investing in the Baltic stocks so far. So I really hope that this type of vehicles we will see them here.
Yeah. Okay. So you already did my job for me. And Mikhail, please tell us about your success story, because every success in Baltics is good for our common market.
Yeah. Thanks. I mean, it's. I think thinking about the past also on the on the Enefit Green IPO, I think the sort of emotion was quite similar. That when you have the sort of overwhelming interest from the local investor base and retail, it's. It's pretty amazing. My personal opinion is that simply LHV as a bank has been an institution that has delivered the results year in and year out. So for the investor base, it's people trust the bank, people trust the plan that the bank has. So in a way, it was just a combination of a very interesting level of return and also the idea that if you do it with LHV, it just engaged a lot of people, and obviously it was much more than probably was originally anticipated. So I think that sort of shows that if a company on the exchange is delivering, performing well, and then over time this trust is being built further and further, which is really important. So I mean it's a function of a large retail base. Good track record so far, and there you go. So that's regarding the subordinated fund issue. But the question regarding institutional investors, I mean, it requires a lot of work. It requires engagement with local institutions, with regional family offices, with international institutions, and for international still, I mean, Baltics is it's not like not the natural place they go to. It's rather small. But ultimately it just requires work. So with large issuers that we go out to the investors that can participate, and with smaller issues we basically talk to institutions and parties that can participate in smaller issues, and those, so to say, over allocate. So ultimately again it sort of boils down to the more issuers we have, the more diverse the exchange and the investor base ultimately will be.
Irmantas, do you have something to add?
Well, it's difficult to add, but since our markets are shallow for larger institutional investors, right? So we need to work with what we have, retail investors base, and success stories such as the LHVs shows that retail investors, they still have liquidity and prepared to invest. And again, back to Lithuanian figures, we have 20 billion euros of households in deposits, right? And only 1 billion euro in stocks. So basically, imagine you pump part of that money from deposits to stocks, you have already the kind of the larger capital market or deeper. And I think, yes, you need to have a size to attract both larger institutional investors. So in my mind, the natural way is really to work with retail base, to increase it, to build up trust. And this index that we will have, or we have, this MSCI, right, the newly introduced index, that's also some technical instrument or tool allowing kind of to recognize Baltic market in the maps of those institutional investors. So I wouldn't say what is better to have like market dominated by institutional. I think you need to have a solid retail base here for a capital market to function properly. So yes, we need, but pension funds, those are kind of again easy targets and low-hanging fruits. So we need to get pension funds as institutional investors into our capital markets. And then perhaps think of those larger ones.
Okay, thank you. And we are nearing the end of our little discussion, but I wanted to ask one final question for each of you is, can your country's government do something more, and should they do something more to stimulate the market? But maybe let's try to keep it short. I know that probably this one question could be a whole discussion for 5 hours, definitely.
Yeah, for Latvia, actually, it's very simple.
Yes.
Just take a decision to list at least one of the state-owned companies as a stock exchange, and that's going to be a job done. Because I think everything else we needed is already done. We have excellent taxation regime, so that people don't need to pay taxes on an annual basis if they have the investment account. We have excellent infrastructure. We have educational programs for the issuers. We have a government support program for which compensates part of the cost for the issuer to come to the stock exchange. So we have an excellent job which was done in the past, but we need just one final cherry on the cake with one of the state-owned companies listed on the stock exchange.
Okay, and Estonia, do you need support from the government to stimulate the market?
No, I think that sorry, any sort of a artificial means to do that might not sort of work in the long run. So I fully agree that it's about listing larger entities. It's because this also brings transparency to the companies themselves. So it's really about sort of transparency, good governance going forward. We have in Estonia, if you think about Port of Tallinn, Benefit Green, for example, I think set a very good track in terms of how these companies perform, in terms of how things are sort of developed. So I fully agree with Roberts. It's the same message, just sort of continue on this, and that will help to sort of build the base also for private companies.
Yes, and Irmantas.
Well, if to choose one thing, so I would say that we need this investment account regime. So it's a shame that our retail investors, we have to pay taxes on their annual gains, respectively of their losses a year before. So this is really what we are lagging behind, and Estonia and Latvia we have, and we need to have. And there is a tax reform under discussion, so I hope very much that it will become attacked next year.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And on this, I will end our discussion. I will thank Robert Idelson, who is the Chief Executive Officer at Signet Bank.
Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Torim, who is the Head of Investment Banking at LHV Group. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And Irmantas Norkus, who is the Managing Partner of Cobalt Lithuania. Thank you for Thank you for participating. Thank you, viewers, for watching. And if you want more serious discussions, probably then in the second week of October, Baltic Capital Markets Conference will happen, where you will be able to meet all of our speakers today and many, many more. So thank you for watching. Un visu labu!